A small light flashed on the command console of the Dauntless. Captain Samuel Wright leaned forward in his chair, narrowing his eyes at the unexpected signal. The exploration vessel had been charting the outer reaches of human space for 3 months without encountering anything unusual. Until now. "Captain, we're picking up an unidentified ship approaching from Sector 7, said Diana Powell, his executive officer. Her voice remained calm, but her posture stiffened as she studied the readings. "Classification?" Wright asked, running a hand through his short gray hair. "Unknown, sir. Definitely not human design. The computer can't match it to any known configuration in our database." The bridge fell silent. After centuries of space exploration, humans had encountered simple life forms on distant planets, but never an advanced civilization capable of interstellar travel. "Battle stations," Wright ordered. "Defensive posture only. Let's not appear threatening." Crew members moved with practiced efficiency. The Dauntless wasn't primarily a warship, but like all human vessels that ventured into deep space, it carried significant defensive capabilities. "The vessel is hailing us, sir," reported Communications Officer Greg Mason. "They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies." Wright straightened his uniform. "Put it through." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a humanoid figure with blue-tinted skin, large almond-shaped eyes, and a series of ridges where a human would have hair. The alien wore an ornate uniform with symbols that presumably denoted rank. "This is Captain Samuel Wright of the United Earth Federation vessel Dauntless. We come in peace." The alien tilted its head slightly before speaking. Its voice was translated through the ship's computer, coming through with only a slight delay. "I am Patrol Commander Hirvex of the Imperial Xilarian Navy. You have entered space claimed by the Galactic Xilarian Empire. Identify your species and declare your intentions." Wright exchanged a quick glance with Powell before responding. "We are humans from the planet Earth. We're on a mission of peaceful exploration. We were unaware this region was claimed territory." The alien commander made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Humans, we have no record of your kind. The Empire spans thousands of worlds across this galaxy. All civilized species acknowledge our authority." "We meant no offense," Wright replied carefully. "We're relatively new to interstellar travel. Perhaps we could arrange a diplomatic meeting to establish formal relations." The alien's posture changed subtly, becoming more rigid. "There is no need for diplomacy. The Empire does not negotiate with lesser species. You will submit to Imperial authority and follow our vessel to the nearest outpost for registration and assignment of your appropriate status within the hierarchy." Wright's jaw tightened. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Commander. We recognize your right to your territory, but we are a sovereign people. We don't submit to anyone." The Xilarian commander appeared genuinely surprised. "This is unusual. Most species understand their place when confronted with Imperial authority. Perhaps we could arrange for our diplomats to meet with yours," Wright suggested. "There's no need for conflict." "You misunderstand, human. This is not a negotiation." The Xilarian's voice hardened. "Your technological level is clearly inferior. Resistance would be pointless and wasteful." Powell leaned closer to Wright. "Sir, they're scanning us. Deep scans of our systems and capabilities." Wright nodded slightly. "Commander Turvex, we wish to maintain peaceful relations, but we will defend ourselves if necessary." The alien made that strange laughing sound again. "Defend? Against the Empire? How charmingly primitive." The Xilarian turned to speak to someone off-screen before facing Wright again. "We will provide a demonstration of Imperial power. Perhaps then you will understand your situation better." Without warning, a beam of energy shot from the alien vessel, passing close to the Dauntless's hull without actually hitting it. "A warning," Turvex explained. "The next will not miss. You have one of your Earth hours to reconsider, submit, or face consequences." The transmission cut off abruptly. Wright turned to his crew, his expression grim. "Send a priority message to Earth Command. We've made first contact. And it's not friendly. Include all sensor data on their vessel." He paused. "And someone find me everything we have on this Xalarian Empire. We need to know what we're dealing with." The emergency session of the United Earth Federation began exactly 12 hours after the Dauntless sent its urgent transmission. Representatives from all human colonies packed the Grand Assembly Hall in Geneva. The mood was tense as military officers and politicians spoke in hushed tones. Admiral Olivia Martinez strode to the central podium. Her decorated uniform and confident bearing commanded immediate attention from the gathered officials. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "the situation is clear. We face an advanced alien empire that expects our immediate surrender. Based on Captain Wright's report, the Xalarians have never encountered meaningful resistance from newly discovered species." Projected behind her, the images of the Xalarian vessel and Commander Turvex drew concerned murmurs from the assembly. "Our analysis suggests they possess technology roughly 20 years ahead of our current capabilities," Martinez continued. "However, they significantly underestimate our military strength and resolve." Senator Paul Harris stood up. "Are you suggesting we go to war with an empire that spans thousands of worlds?" Martinez shook her head. "I'm suggesting we make it clear that humans aren't like the other species they've encountered. We need to demonstrate that the cost of subjugating us would be too high." President Jack Harmon entered the chamber. The room fell silent as he walked to the podium. Though in his 60s, Harmon moved with purpose, his expression serious but controlled. "This morning I spoke with the leaders of every human colony," Harmon said. "We are united in our response. Throughout our history on Earth, humanity has faced extinction-level threats from each other, from nature, from our own creations. Each time, we survived." He gestured toward the display showing the Xalarian commander. "These aliens expect us to bow based on a show of force. They believe their superior technology guarantees our compliance. They don't understand what it means to be human." Harmon turned to the defense minister. "Are the fleets in position?" "Yes, Mr. President. Reserve forces are mobilizing across all colonies. The Dauntless has withdrawn to safe distance, but maintains observation." Harmon nodded. "Then let's reply to our new galactic neighbors." The chamber's main screen switched to a recording studio, where Harmon would deliver humanity's response. Communications specialists adjusted equipment, ensuring the message would transmit clearly to the waiting Xalarian vessel. "Translation protocols are ready, sir," a technician reported. "We've analyzed their language patterns from the initial contact." Harmon straightened his jacket and faced the camera. The red light blinked on. "I am President Jack Harmon of the United Earth Federation. I address this message to the Xalarian Empire and its leadership. We have received your demand for our submission, and we have a simple answer: no." Harmon paused, his expression firm, but not hostile. "We come in peace, but we do not bow. Throughout our history, those who have underestimated humanity have paid dearly. This is not a threat, but a warning. Walk away." In another part of the complex, Colonel Susan Miller watched the broadcast with her tactical team. "They won't listen," she said quietly. "Empire types never do." Her assistant nodded. "Defense grids are at full power across all colonies. First response fleets are on high alert. Across human space, military vessels moved into defensive formations. On frontier colonies, civilians began preparations for possible evacuation. On the distant Xalarian throne world, Emperor Gruzoth viewed the human message with amusement. Surrounded by courtiers and military advisors, the ancient ruler waved a dismissive hand. "What curious creatures," he remarked. "They speak as if they have a choice." His High Admiral bowed. "Shall we send the subjugation fleet, Your Eminence?" "Yes," the Emperor replied. "A small one. These humans require a lesson in galactic realities." As the orders went out, none of the Xalarians noticed the small probe that had followed their messenger ship back from human space. Hidden in the shadow of a moon, it recorded everything and prepared to return to Earth with critical intelligence. The first moves in humanity's first interstellar war had begun. The colony world of New Horizon received the warning 3 days before the Xelarian fleet arrived. Governor Frank Ortiz stood at the command center window, watching as thousands of civilians boarded evacuation ships. "How many more to go?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. "About 30% of the population, sir," replied his aide. "The priority groups are already off-world, mostly just those who chose to stay, and the defense forces now." Ortiz nodded, watching the distant gleam of ships rising into the orange sky. New Horizon had been a thriving colony of 6 million people just days ago. Now it might become the first battlefield in humanity's first interstellar war. "Governor, we have multiple contacts entering the system," called out the sensor officer. "Matching the profile of Xelarian vessels, much larger force than we anticipated." Lieutenant Amy Davidson entered the command center, her combat armor already in place. "Defense teams are in position, sir. Automated systems are online and ready." "Good," Ortiz said. "Remember the plan. We make a show of resistance, then withdraw. No heroics." Davidson nodded. "Yes, sir. The traps are set." Above the planet, 12 massive Xelarian warships moved into attack formation. On the command vessel, Fleet Commander Vexel studied the human colony with disdain. "Primitive defenses," he noted to his subordinates. "Their ships are retreating already. Typical behavior for a lesser species when facing the Empire." His second-in-command gestured toward the sensor displays. "There appears to be a small defensive force remaining on the surface." Vexel made a dismissive gesture. "A token resistance. Deploy the landing forces and begin standard subjugation procedures. I want their defense grid disabled first." The Xelarian battleships launched hundreds of fighters and troop carriers. They descended toward the colony's main settlement in perfect formation, never breaking ranks. On the surface, Lieutenant Davidson watched from her concealed position. "They're coming in exactly as Admiral Martinez predicted," she said into her comm. "No adaptation, no scouting. Just a straight assault." "Standard Imperial procedure," responded her tactical officer. "All automated defense units are tracking, waiting for your command." Davidson waited until the first wave of Xelarian forces was fully committed to their attack run. "Execute Defense Plan Alpha." Across the colony, hidden installations activated. But instead of firing directly at the approaching forces, they targeted seemingly empty areas of space. Aboard his command ship, Vexel frowned as strange energy readings appeared on his monitors. "What are they doing? Their weapons aren't even aimed at our forces." Suddenly, dozens of small gravitational distortions appeared in the path of the Xelarian attack formation. The carefully ordered ships had no time to react as they flew directly into invisible gravitational shear zones. "Evasive action," Vexel shouted, but it was too late. The lead fighters tumbled out of control as localized gravity fields tore at their structures. Troop carriers collided with each other, unable to navigate the invisible maze that human defensive systems had created in their path. On the ground, Davidson turned to her team. "Phase 1 complete. Begin withdrawal to secondary positions." The human defenders pulled back as nearly a third of the Xelarian landing force crashed or was forced to pull away. The remaining alien ships landed, disgorging troops that moved with mechanical precision toward the colony center. "They're still following standard invasion protocol," Davidson noted. "No adaptation." Her sergeant nodded. "They've never needed to adapt before." The Xelarian ground commander led his forces toward the human settlement, expecting the remaining defenders to surrender once they witnessed Imperial might. Instead, they found empty buildings rigged with technological surprises. Across the colony, automated defense systems activated, targeting the invaders with precisely calculated force. Not enough to destroy the superior Xelarian technology, but enough to slow them down and gather combat data. From orbit, Vexel watched with growing frustration as his ground forces reported unexpected resistance. "A minor setback," he told his officers as he prepared his report to Imperial Command. "The humans show unusual tactical thinking, but their technology is inferior. Victory is inevitable. But deep down, a small worry began to form. These humans didn't behave like any species the Empire had ever conquered before. The Strategic Command Center, buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, buzzed with activity. Admiral Olivia Martinez studied the holographic display showing the battle at New Horizon. The colony had held out longer than expected, but was now firmly under Xelarian control. Lieutenant Davidson's forces have successfully withdrawn with 89% of their personnel, reported her aide. The combat data they collected has been fully transmitted. Martinez nodded. And the Xelarians? Acting exactly as predicted. They've established a standard occupation pattern and are beginning resource extraction. Their main fleet remains in orbit. The Admiral touched a control panel, and the display shifted to show a different sector of space. A human battle group of 30 ships waited in formation, hidden within the magnetic field of a gas giant, 2 systems away from New Horizon. "It's time for Operation Prometheus," Martinez said. "Send the authorization." In a secured laboratory station orbiting Neptune, scientists Natalie Wilson and Eric Russell received the coded message they had been waiting for. They exchanged a grim look before approaching the sealed chamber containing their life's work. "I was hoping we'd never have to use this," Wilson said quietly as she entered her access code. Russell nodded. Theoretical physics wasn't supposed to become weapons technology. The chamber opened to reveal a series of devices no larger than coffee mugs. Each contained technology that manipulated the quantum fabric of space-time in ways that had been purely theoretical just 5 years earlier. "Quantum displacement warheads are armed and ready for deployment," Russell reported through the secure channel. "May God forgive us for what we've created." General Kevin Phillips commanded the human response fleet from the bridge of the dreadnought Valiant. When the authorization came through, he addressed his captains through the fleet-wide communication system. "The Xelarians believe they're dealing with a primitive species that will surrender after a show of force," Phillips said. "They expect us to either bow down or fight conventionally. We'll do neither. Remember your training. Unconventional tactics, hit-and-run strikes. Let's show them why humanity has survived everything our own planet has thrown at us." The human fleet accelerated to FTL speed, but instead of approaching New Horizon directly, they scattered into smaller groups, approaching from multiple vectors. On New Horizon, the Xelarian commander Vexol received the alert of incoming ships with satisfaction, so they decided to fight after all. Predictable. Prepare to destroy their primitive fleet. His tactical officer looked confused. "Sir, their approach is unusual. They're coming in scattered formations, on multiple vectors." "Irrelevant," Vexol dismissed. "Deploy the battle line." The massive Xelarian warships formed up in their standard crescent formation, a tactic that had dominated space warfare against countless species for millennia. Their energy weapons powered up, ready to unleash devastating firepower. But the human ships didn't form a opposing line. Instead, they executed a series of rapid micro-jumps, appearing and disappearing at different points around the Xelarian formation. "What is this?" Vexol demanded as his gunners struggled to target the erratically moving human vessels. The first quantum displacement warhead detonated near the Xelarian flagship. There was no explosion, no energy blast, just a sudden distortion of space that twisted the rear section of the massive warship like it was made of clay. "Impossible," shouted the Xelarian science officer. "They're manipulating gravitational fields at the quantum level." Human fighters swarmed between the larger ships, targeting specific systems rather than trying to destroy the vessels outright. They fought like nothing the Xelarians had encountered before, not seeking a glorious victory in direct confrontation, but systematically dismantling their enemy's ability to fight back. On the surface, Lieutenant Davidson led her remaining forces in a surprise attack against the Xelarian ground headquarters. "Remember, we're not trying to win, just to confuse and distract," she told her soldiers. After 6 hours of chaotic battle, the remaining Xelarian ships retreated in disarray. General Phillips didn't pursue. instead establishing a defensive perimeter around New Horizon. "We've won the first real battle," he reported to Admiral Martinez, "but at heavy cost." Martinez nodded soberly. "They'll be back, and next time, they'll know what they're facing." Emperor Grazoth smashed his fist against the arm of his throne, sending cracks through the ancient stone. The court attendants flinched at his rage, backing away from the massive hologram showing the defeat at New Horizon. "Impossible," he roared. "A minor species with barely developed interstellar capability has defeated an Imperial battle group." High Admiral Zolthrak knelt before his emperor, keeping his head bowed. Unlike the other military leaders, Zolthrak's body bore numerous scars, rare marks of actual combat in an empire that had faced no real opposition for generations. "The humans used unexpected tactics, Your Eminence," Zolthrak explained. "They possess technology we didn't anticipate. Quantum displacement weapons that alter the fabric of space itself." Grazoth's eyes narrowed. "You speak of them with respect, Admiral. That displeases me." Zolthrak raised his head slightly. "I respect any enemy who fights well, my Emperor. It makes victory over them more meaningful." The Emperor studied his most decorated commander for a moment, then nodded. "You will lead our response. Take the 7th Imperial Armada. Show these humans what true power means." "As you command." Zolthrak rose. "I request permission to deploy the planet killer weapons." A hushed silence fell over the court. Such weapons hadn't been used in over 1,000 years. "Granted," the Emperor said coldly. "Make an example of their worlds." Across human space, preparations for the coming storm intensified. At the shipyards orbiting Mars, engineers worked around the clock to retrofit vessels with new defensive systems based on data from New Horizon. Captain Heather Rodriguez studied the holographic blueprint of the Xelarian command ship. Her stealth vessel Shadow was being prepared for the most dangerous mission of the war. "Their security protocols are organized around defending against frontal assaults," she told her small team of specialists. "They've never needed to worry about infiltration." Lieutenant Daniel Garcia, the team's intelligence officer, pointed to a section of the alien vessel. "Their command systems all route through these central processors. If we can access them, we could disrupt their entire fleet's coordination." "Getting in is the easy part," Rodriguez replied. "Getting out with the information is what concerns me." On Earth, Admiral Martinez conferred with the combined military leadership in the war room. The holographic display showed the massive Xelarian armada moving steadily toward human space. "They're not hiding their approach," noted General Phillips. "This is meant to intimidate us." Martinez nodded. "Intelligence suggests they're bringing planet killer weapons. They intend to make an example of us." "What's our strategy?" asked Colonel Linda Bennett. "We can't match them ship for ship." Martinez gestured to the star map, highlighting a system near the edge of human territory. "We make our stand at Arcturus. The system's unusual radiation belt will limit their sensor range, partially negating their technological advantage." "Arcturus has 4 million colonists," Phillips pointed out. "We'd be putting them directly in harm's way." "Evacuation is already underway," Martinez replied grimly. "But we need that system's strategic position. If we lose Arcturus, we lose the war." As preparations continued, Martinez addressed the combined fleet commanders. The gathered officers fell silent as she stepped onto the platform. "In 3 days, we faced the largest alien armada ever assembled against humanity," she began. "The Xelarians believe this will be the decisive battle that breaks our resistance. They expect us to either surrender or die." She paused, looking at each commander in turn. "What they fail to understand is our history. They've never faced extinction before. We have, repeatedly, and survived. From the earliest days on Earth, humans have endured disasters, plagues, and wars that should have ended us. But we're still here." The room remained silent as her words sank in. "The Xelarians fight to expand their empire. We fight for our very existence. And that makes all the difference." On the bridge of his massive flagship, High Admiral Zolthrak studied everything known about human warfare. Unlike his predecessors, he would not underestimate these strange new enemies. They are cunning and unpredictable, he told his officers, but they lack our resources and experience. This will not be an easy victory, but it will be victory nonetheless. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin. The first signs of the Xilarian Armada appeared on long-range sensors as tiny specks of light. Within hours, the specks expanded into a vast flotilla of warships that stretched across the Arcturus system. The human defense fleet looked impossibly small in comparison. Commander Lisa Bennett watched from the cockpit of her fighter as the enemy approached. Her squadron of 60 fighters represented the best pilots humanity had to offer. "All wings, check in," she ordered, her voice calm despite the odds they faced. One by one, her pilots responded. Many were young, barely out of training, but all had volunteered for what might be a one-way mission. "Remember the plan," Bennett said. "We're not trying to win through direct engagement. Hit their sensor arrays and communication nodes, then withdraw. Speed and precision over power." On the surface of Arcturus IV, Major Ryan Jackson supervised the placement of ground defenses. Though most civilians had been evacuated, thousands of volunteers had stayed behind to support the military forces. "Those shield generators need to be buried deeper," Jackson called out to an engineering team. "When they start orbital bombardment, surface installations won't last 5 minutes. A young sergeant approached him with a datapad. "Sir, the last of the quantum mines have been placed in the upper atmosphere. If they attempt a landing, they'll have a nasty surprise." Jackson nodded. "Good. Now get those civilians to the underground bunkers. The show's about to start." In orbit, Admiral Martinez watched as the Xilarian fleet formed into attack position. Their formation was different this time. High Admiral Zolthrak had clearly studied the defeat at New Horizon. "They're adapting," she noted to her staff. "Launch Operation Rabbit Hole." Throughout the system, specially modified unmanned ships activated, creating artificial wormholes at strategic points. These temporary ruptures in space weren't large enough or stable enough for ships to pass through, but they would disrupt the Xilarian battle plans. Aboard the massive Xilarian flagship, High Admiral Zolthrak noticed the strange energy signatures immediately. "What are they doing?" he demanded of his science officer. "They appear to be creating small-scale spatial distortions, Admiral. Similar to our own jump technology, but less stable." Zolthrak studied the tactical display. "A diversion. Begin the attack, but maintain formation integrity. Do not pursue their fighters when they retreat." The Xilarian weapons opened fire, sending brilliant energy beams toward the human fleet. The battle had begun. Commander Bennett led her fighters in a daring attack run against the Lid Xilarian vessels. Instead of targeting weapons or engines, they focused fire on communications arrays and sensor pods. "Like blinding a boxer," Bennett told her pilots. "They can still punch, but they won't know where to aim." The human capital ships executed a complex defensive pattern, never staying in one position long enough to become easy targets. Though several took heavy damage, they inflicted significant casualties on the Xilarian front line. Meanwhile, deep within the Xilarian flagship, Captain Rodriguez and her infiltration team moved silently through maintenance tunnels. They had boarded during the confusion of the initial engagement, their stealth shuttle disguised as debris. "Security is heavier than expected," whispered Garcia as they approached the central command processor. "They've learned from New Horizon." Rodriguez nodded. "Plan B, then. We don't need physical access to the core." She removed a small device from her pack, one of the experimental quantum displacement units, modified for this specific purpose. "This will create a micro-distortion in their computer system's quantum substrate," she explained. "Not enough to destroy it, but enough to introduce subtle errors in targeting and coordination." On the surface, Major Jackson's forces engaged the first wave of Xilarian landing craft. Though outnumbered and outgunned, the human defenders used the planet's difficult terrain to their advantage. ambushing the methodical alien forces and disappearing before retaliation could find them. They still move like they're on parade, Jackson told his officers. Use that against them. As the battle raged into its fifth hour, Admiral Martinez received the coded signal from Rodriguez's team. The sabotage was complete. Martinez immediately ordered the next phase of the operation. Throughout the system, the artificial wormholes suddenly expanded, creating a web of spatial distortions that enveloped portions of the Xelarian fleet. Ships caught in these distortions found their communications scrambled and their formations disrupted. The Imperial Palace on Xelaria Prime had stood for 10,000 years. Its towering spires and massive defensive walls had never been breached, never been threatened. Until today. Ambassador William Chen stood at the viewport of the human diplomatic vessel as it descended toward the palace landing pad. Behind his ship, a small escort of human warships maintained position in high orbit, a token force compared to the Imperial fleet, but a pointed reminder of what had transpired at Arcturus. "They're scanning us extensively," noted his aide, Jason Foster. "Security protocols beyond anything we've seen before." Chen nodded. "They're afraid, probably for the first time in their history." The Battle of Arcturus had ended in a way no one had predicted. The Xelarian Armada, though vastly superior in numbers and firepower, had been forced to retreat after suffering critical failures in their command and coordination systems. High Admiral Zolthrak had withdrawn his forces rather than risk complete destruction. Now, 3 weeks later, humanity had pushed the advantage in a way the Xelarians never expected, through diplomacy rather than conquest. "Landing clearance confirmed," Foster said. "They're expecting us in the Grand Audience Chamber." Chen straightened his formal diplomatic uniform. "Remember, no weapons. We need to show them we come in peace, but from a position of strength." The human delegation walked from their ship across the gleaming ceremonial pathway. Xelarian guards lined the route, their posture rigid, their eyes following the humans with a mixture of fear and hatred. Inside the palace, Emperor Grazov waited on his throne, surrounded by advisors and military leaders. High Admiral Zolthrak stood to his right, his expression unreadable. "The human ambassadors," announced the court herald as Chen and his team entered the vast chamber. Chen approached the throne and bowed, slightly less deeply than protocol demanded. The subtle gesture wasn't lost on the emperor. "You stand in the heart of an empire that has existed for 50,000 years, Grazov said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Your species has barely left its home planet, yet you presume to dictate terms." Chen smiled politely. "We're not here to dictate, Emperor Grazov. We're here to establish mutual understanding." "Understanding." The emperor's voice rose. "You destroyed half of my fleet. Your forces remain in Imperial territory even now." "A regrettable necessity," Chen replied calmly. "Our analysts predicted you wouldn't believe our capabilities without demonstration." At that moment, the palace lights flickered briefly. Confusion spread among the Xelarian officials. "A small demonstration," Chen explained. "We just temporarily neutralized your palace defense grid. We could have done the same to your planetary shields, but that would have been unnecessarily alarming." The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Emperor Grazov rose from his throne, his face contorted with rage. "Silence," commanded High Admiral Zolthrak, surprising everyone. He turned to the emperor. "Your Eminence, I recommend we hear their terms." The emperor stared at his most trusted military leader in shock. "You suggest we negotiate with them, after their insolence?" Zolthrak nodded solemnly. "I have faced these humans in battle. They do not fight as other species do. They could have destroyed my entire fleet at Arcturus, but they chose restraint. That is unusual." Chen stepped forward. "Our terms are simple. Respect our borders, acknowledge our sovereignty, and we can have peace. Continue this war, and your empire ends, not because we want to destroy you, but because we will if we must." He paused, letting his words sink in. Humanity has spent its history fighting, against nature, against each other, against extinction itself. War is in our blood, but so is peace. We prefer it, actually. The choice is yours." The Council of Elders, gathered behind the throne, began to whisper urgently among themselves. One stepped forward. "The Council requests a recess to consider these terms," she announced. Emperor Grazov looked as if he might explode with anger, but the expressions on his advisors' faces made him hesitate. For the first time in his reign, he saw real fear among his inner circle. "Very well," he conceded reluctantly. "We will consider your proposal." 3 days later, the Treaty of Sileria was signed. The Galactic Silurian Empire formally recognized the United Earth Federation as a sovereign power. Border agreements were established, and cultural exchanges planned. As Ambassador Chen prepared to leave the imperial capital, High Admiral Zolthrak requested a private meeting. "I must know," the Silurian asked, "how did your species develop such resolve? Such fearlessness in the face of overwhelming odds?"